Okay, everybody. In this video, we're going to talk about quiz 3. This is our week 3 study guide here. So in this one, we talked about World War One, interest groups, and obviously elections and voting. So let's go ahead and take a look. Know the causes of World War One, right? We all know Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary was assassinated by a Serbian nationalistic terrorist group, and that kind of set off the chain of events that caused World War One. There was a lot of things that were involved. The sense of militarism, alliances coming together, some of the nationalistic point of views that were being pushed, and the concept of imperialism were some of the causes. And let's go ahead and take a look at the second point, Wilsonianism. Woodrow Wilson, his belief was kind of a foreign policy where, we kind of attach, the feelings of, self-determination, having a democratic government, collective security, international law, and establishing a League of Nations, which kind of ties into Wilson's 14 points. So we know the basic principles of Wilsonianism, and that's also extended into Wilson's 14 points, where he wanted diplomacy without secret treaties. He wanted to be able to practice free trade over the seas during war and peace. Creating the League of Nations was a big one, which evolved into the United Nations now. Readjusting the Italian borders. So a bunch of things that he put in place. I don't expect you to know each individual thing, but just kind of the generalities of it and what he was trying to seek. Okay, kind of going to interest groups. Know about PACs. PACs are political action committees, and PACs will use lobbyists to lobby members of Congress to get what's called access. And that's the most important thing that a lobbyist can provide, is access to an interest group, because then you have a direct connection between an interest group, a lobbyist, and a member of Congress. So we'll look at PETA for an example. PETA is an interest group. They'll use lobbying methods or lobbyists to go and lobby members of Congress for certain things. And, one of the things that you can kind of look at when you talk about this is it might be a legal form of bribery, because you're giving money to a decision maker to try to influence them in seeing an issue the way you want them to see. So there's a bunch of different interest groups we see here. We have farmer rights movements that happened in the late 60s where, farm workers came about by merging two labor unions, one led by Cesar Chavez, which were a group of Mexican Americans, and the other led by Larry Italong, which was a group of Filipino Americans that came together and formed the United Farm Workers. And they had the United Farm Workers movement that happened to try to get better conditions for people that worked out in the fields and picked and all that stuff. Know some trade association groups like the Chamber of Commerce. We talked about access, right? We have, access is going to be the most important thing to have, right? Those that have access are key members of lobbying groups, because sometimes when people who leave Congress or leave the White House, they can become lobbyists, and they share the ability to be able to have personal contact with decision makers. So once a person leaves Congress, remember they have the ability to be able to contact maybe their former colleagues. They'll have their phone number, they'll have their cell phone number, they'll have their email address, they'll know their aides, they'll know all of this stuff that is kind of a plus when you're doing lobbying. And lobbyists will also provide information on things like having an expertise on issues. Knowing the legislative process, where a group stands on an issue. But remember, lobbyists have to report or disclose how much they spend, how much they influence members of Congress with. So there is a website called Open Secrets, and look on Open Secrets, opensecrets.org, and they have a database of money that goes to members of Congress. And we also have the concept of super PACs, right? The largest number of PACs come from corporations, but we also have something called super PACs, which are kind of an enhanced PAC. As long as it's not affiliated with the candidate, it could spend unlimited amounts of money on elections, either to get somebody elected or to defeat somebody, to get an issue passed or to defeat an issue. Um, you know, it's kind of something that came out of a case called Citizens United, where the Supreme Court saw that or ruled that if you have a super PAC, as long as it is not affiliated with a candidate and the candidate isn't directing it, they can spend unlimited amounts of money, right? And that's kind of maybe unfair with us as citizens, because we as citizens can give money to candidates as well, but the max you can give per election cycle is $2,900. So who are they going to pay attention more? Who are decision makers or congresspersons going to pay attention more to? People that can give them unlimited amounts of money, or people that can give them only maybe $2,900? Citizens United said that corporations were entitled to free speech, and if you regulated the amount of money that they spend on elections, then you were, in a sense, infringing on their right to free speech. And, I can go off on this and talk about it about an hour and how, kind of dumb this decision is, but we'll save that later down the road. But just kind of keep in mind what Citizens United is. We talked about ideological interest groups. Those are like pro-life groups, pro-choice groups. We went over the farm movements and trade association groups. We have women's interest groups. One of the biggest ones is the National Organization of Women, that has been around for a long time and is still very active today. And all these interest groups' activity are protected by the First Amendment. So we have civil rights groups like the NAACP, the Urban League, and LGBTQI groups such as GLAAD and Equality California. They all try to advocate, by using their First Amendment rights, to advocate for their interest and put, in a sense, pressure on a member of Congress or a candidate to see their point of view and maybe try to influence that point of view to be put forth in some type of legislation. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about elections and voting and political parties. Remember that most people don't vote on a candidate's stance on a policy. Usually they vote retroactively or based off of a candidate's image, right? Retrospectively would be in a sense that you look maybe at past judgments or past actions of a candidate and see that, okay, they didn't do well on this. Maybe I need to give this other candidate a shot. I'm reading through a book on the Trump presidency, and one of the kind of the inferences that the author makes is that a lot of people were concerned with how Trump was handling the coronavirus response, so that might have swayed them in voting for Biden. Maybe some of his rhetoric was, looked at as negative, and maybe that might have pushed somebody toward Biden. So that's where we vote, and we take a past, kind of look at. And I think in the lecture I talk about George W. Bush and how people voted retrospectively in that election, where when Obama became president, because during the Bush administration we had 2 wars that were never ending, and we had a really bad economic crisis where the housing market crashed. So that was an example where maybe somebody voted retroactively in that. A candidate's image is also important. A candidate will vote give their vote to somebody that might have charm, confidence, or even attractiveness, right? A policy voter is going to be a person that will vote based off of a candidate's position on things like taxes, maybe abortion, maybe the environment, maybe race relations, and all that stuff. We kind of have 2 concepts that are happening every so often in the voter electorate that exists here. 2 concepts known as realignment and de-alignment. Realignment is when a demographic group of people detach themselves from a party and realign themselves to another party. Now, one thing I don't agree with the author in this text is that he says that the Democrats really rely on Catholic people and the vote. I disagree. I don't think the Catholic religion or the people that practice Catholicism are as much inclined to attach themselves to the Democratic Party as in the past. You know, if we go from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, the Catholics were a big part of the Democratic Party. But now, since we have a lot of kind of social issues that have popped up, like same-sex marriage or, abortion, I think a lot of Catholics had realigned themselves uh, with the Republican Party. All right. Now you have an instance called de-alignment where people totally detach themselves from a party and become independent. So that's de-alignment. Remember, know what a responsible party system means. That parties cannot hold their elected officials accountable for not carrying out their promises or their policies. Know that the way to win elections, candidates need to focus on the middle. A majority of your voters are going to be in the middle, right? And that's the important part, and that's the segment of the electorate that you have to appeal to. So what you have to do is you have to move yourself along enough to the ideological spectrum to attract voters from the middle while not alienating your base, right? So just some things to know. Know about the first goal of a party is to win. Always to win election. Know about third parties and the third parties that we have here in the United States. And the Libertarian Party is the biggest third party. They're the most successful party here in the United States. But they're really never going to win at the national level. And that's why third parties kind of fail in our system, because a lot of third parties aren't on ballots in each and every state. I think the Libertarian Party is only on 33 ballots within the United States. So, they might not be able to win a national election with that. Know the demographics, like who is a Republican generally. It's usually a male, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Generally, females tend to be more democratic. And, we kind of look at maybe social issues that affect women. Maybe, the ability to choose whether or not to have an abortion. Equal pay, maybe stronger laws that govern sexual harassment at work. So things like that. Know what the participation rates are. Generally, the participation rates are really low in off-cycle elections. We have the midterms coming up in November. Generally, you have about 30 to 40% of the electorate participating in midterms. In the presidential election, you could see upwards to about 70% participation rates in the election. So generally, roughly half, right? Again, know the demographics for the Democratic Party. Know what Tweedledee and Tweedledum is. It's kind of a falsehood. The term Tweedledee and Tweedledum are used to say that Democrats and Republicans are the same, but in fact, they have very different policies. Know where Democrats and Republicans get their money. Generally, the Democrats will get their money from lawyers, unions, maybe Hollywood. Republicans will get their money from real estate, oil and gas industries. And a lot of these parties, and I think we're kind of seeing this now, a lot of these parties who are influenced by interest groups, interest groups also kind of have that iron law of oligarchy that we talk about. A lot of, limitation on guns has been, gun rights has been in the news lately. And generally the people that govern these these elitist type interest group organizations will maybe not practice or maybe not necessarily address the values that reflect those of their members. The NRA is a good example. I think I saw a survey where 75% of the NRA are in favor of some type of comprehensive background check for people that buy firearms. But that's not something that is valued by the governing body of the NRA. So their values might not necessarily reflect those of their members, and that might be kind of consistent through each and every interest group that we have. Um, Take a look at that Stephen Colbert video that's posted. It's pretty interesting. So look at that. It's a good explanation of super PACs. Kind of know also what nativist parties are. Nativist parties, currently throughout our history, we've had kind of an anti-Irish Catholic movement, anti-Italian, anti-Chinese, anti-Mexican, maybe now even anti-Central American, kind of, the nativist thought that we should have one culture, one language. Okay, so go ahead and take a look at this. If you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.